start now. It's almost 6:05, so yeah, let's go into the discussion. Welcome to just another discussion under the headline Tree Talks, the Young Civil Society Tech Stock, an event which belongs to a series of events actually that we as Young European Federalists Germany are organizing with support from the German Ministry for Foreign Affairs as part of the Besser zusammen or Better Together campaign for the German EU Council presidency. Just a few organizational things at the beginning. The event will be streamed live on Facebook and recorded for documentation purposes. And by participating, you agree to this. If you do not wish to be seen, just switch off your cameras and please to enjoy a smooth conversation, mute yourself during the event. Well, you surely remember about 6 months ago, we were at the beginning of a new trio presidency and Croatia handed over to Germany. A lot has happened since then, and while we tonight unfortunately cannot provide a fully comprehensive analysis of the successes and failures, we still want to try to draw a first conclusion of three of the most important topics. To do so, we asked for a little help and found it among our comrades in the Young Civil Society. Therefore, I'm very excited to welcome three wonderful guests this evening. Firstly, here's Joscha Wagner, the Vice President of the Youth Committee of European Trade Union Confederation, who will discuss with us the social and economic implications of the crisis and how Europe should deal with these. And secondly, we have Christoph Schuch, who's a human rights activist for Amnesty International, as well as the Refugee Law Clinic in Göttingen, and who will guide us a little through the issue of asylum and migration. And finally, we have Maria Popczyk, who's the editor-in-chief of the Kurier Europejski, the Polish version of the Treffpunkt Europa.de, and who will give us some insight on the perception of the rule of law debate in Poland. My name is Clara Völler, and I'm the president of the Young European Federalists Germany, and I will moderate this event tonight. On a final note, you as participants will have the chance to engage in the discussion as well by submitting your questions via the Mentimeter. You should see the code on the screen. If you go one slide further in the presentation, maybe. If that works, let's see. Yes, perfect. Here you have the code, and there you can engage with your questions. So to start with our first topic, which is the social and economic recovery, I welcome Joscha. Hi, Joscha.
Hey, nice to see you here. Good evening from me. My name is Joscha. I just start right away, right? Oh, all right. I'm based in Germany and the elected vice president of the ETUC Youth Committee. The European Trade Union Confederation is the umbrella organization of trade union organizations in Europe. So we have 89 member organizations and 10 European federations in our umbrella organization, and we represent workers from Europe, EU and further European countries. So I'm 27 years old and being a trade unionist activist for DGB Youth, which is the German Trade Union Confederation, for around 4 years now, and since 2 years on the European level as well. And I've prepared a brief introductory speech where I want to focus on a trade union perspective, on the recovery and resilience plan by the EU, the youth guarantee as one specific policy instrument, which was also the topic of the German Council's presidency, and finally conclude with some general remarks from a young trade unionist perspective. So,
just for everybody to know what you're seeing on the screen, we asked Joscha to do this initial statement, and here's the question we posed. So yeah, but please go ahead.
Yeah, which is indeed a very broad question, but I try to pick out, as I said, the youth guarantee as our top priority for this German term. But yeah, starting with the recovery and resilience plan, we as trade unionists are deeply concerned today about the devastating effects of the pandemic is having on workers in Europe, and especially young workers. Young people got especially hit hard by crisis, a fact that we have seen in the financial crisis or in the aftermath of the financial crisis of 2008 and 9 already. So in this concern, history repeats itself. In general, we can say as trade unionists, we appreciate the EU Recovery and Resilience Plan, since it marks a fundamental change in the crisis response of the EU. Instead of austerity measures and cuts in wages, as well as in public services and social protection, which were applied in the aftermath of the financial crisis, now massive investments in the economy and thus in a greener and more digital future are today's answer. This is, as we say, a good message for working people and their families. It is not less than a historical opportunity. But to be honest, the whole EU funding will not be dispersed before the second half of 2021. Though we are getting hit by the second wave of the pandemic right now, as it's the case in all European countries today. Having this in mind, it is mandatory that the member states prolong their emergency measures until next year, which counts for like short-term work measures. There's also a European instrument right now, which we welcome, but also all the measures on the national level. Employment and income support of all categories of workers is needed now, and not only for typical workers, but especially for those in precarious jobs, in short-term contracts, and so on. As ETUC, we have launched a campaign named A People's Recovery. Some weeks ago, we demand that national governments have to concentrate on making the most of the national recovery and resilience plans, because these are decided on a national level, of course, not on the EU level, to save and create jobs in all sectors and industry, and to make sure, this is what we as trade unions stand for, that workers' rights, social dialogue, collective bargaining, and democracy at work are respected as an integral part of a sustainable recovery. A recovery based on fair working and living conditions, which would not incur any further cuts on wages and pensions. In addition, youth-specific measures, this is where we jump in as youth committee, let's say, must be included in the plans, because young people's perspectives are in the most cases not really reflected in these plans yet. Precisely because young workers are hit, as I said, particularly hard by the crisis. For all of this, we say the social partners, so also the organizations of the employers, must be involved in the design, implementation, and also the monitoring of the national recovery plans. We have to be involved in all decisions that impact working people, but today we are not. Finally, I'd like to emphasize that decent jobs and working conditions would be the best resilience for young working people, especially those in precarious jobs with low wages, temporary contract, as it is the reality for a lot of people in Europe today. They were most affected by the current pandemic and its economic impacts. With the European Pillar of Social Rights, we have a great framework at EU level to improve the situation of workers substantially. But until today, the EPSR is neither binding nor implemented yet. That's what needs to be done in the near future. It must become the essential part of the recovery to return the recovery into a people's recovery. That's what we say. Now, after this broader overview, I'd like to focus on the youth guarantee. Focusing on young people, it was the most important decision in the German presidency. The youth guarantee is a structural framework which was established 2013 as the EU instrument to tackle youth unemployment. Member states have committed to the goal that all people under 25 would receive a good quality offer of employment, continued education, an apprenticeship, or a traineeship within a period of 4 months of becoming unemployed or leaving formal education. This was the promise which was set after the aftermath of the crisis 2008 and 9, then in 2013. The new head of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, announced a reinforcement, she said, of the youth guarantee in her introductory speech at the time in summer or fall last year, when the youth unemployment situation was improving little by little, but the pandemic was not even in sight. In early spring 2020, it suddenly became clear that we need a new youth guarantee immediately amid the pandemic was hitting Europe and young people were losing their jobs rapidly. So we as ETUC Youth were involved in the plans for the new youth guarantee already prior to the crisis, but then the whole necessity of the new youth guarantee changed immediately. Today, after declining for 6 years, youth unemployment rises dramatically each month in 2020, which is very bad numbers we are seeing each month. And yes, coming back to the youth guarantee, which had some issues, the former one, let's say the 2013 one, which lacked effectivity in the last years, and in some cases, especially in Spain, even led to the subsidiation of precarious jobs. We as ETUC Youth campaigned for a quality framework in the so-called reinforced youth guarantee. We said that funding to employers, because they, with European money, employers are directly funded via the youth guarantee. We said these funding must be binded to concrete quality criteria like minimum requirements under labor law or access to social security for those who are in measures financed by the EU in the youth guarantee. Despite the support of the European Parliament, which adopted a corresponding resolution calling for minimum standards, the fight for a quality framework was sadly not successful. Still, the Council adopted punctual improvements of the youth guarantee, namely an improved budget, an extension of the age group to 29, and a greater consideration for disadvantaged young people. In addition, initiatives to promote vocational training, incentives to expand dual vocational training, and further measures to promote youth unemployment and self-employment are included in the package, which may have an impact in the medium and long term, but are not decisive for the acute situation right now. So we say it will not really be an answer to the crisis, these messages I said. All in all, it is disappointing, and here we come to the German Council presidency, that nothing more than a minimum compromise could be achieved, especially since the German government had named the youth guarantee and fighting youth unemployment as one of its priorities. It will now be implemented at the national level, so it is up to the national governments to implement quality criteria and to involve the social partners and youth organizations in the implementation process. We as ETUC Youth will follow this process closely and support our national affiliates and national youth committees in this process. Now I'm concluding with some challenges which are yet to be addressed. And I want to start with a few on the structural level, because urgent action is needed to massively strengthen the collective bargaining system in Europe. They are in a very bad shape these days, except for the northern countries. And effective and good collective bargaining systems would be an essential step toward decent jobs in general. Incidentally, this is what we are currently campaigning for in the context of drawing up the minimum wage instrument, which was also a first draft was launched also in the German presidency, but I don't want to focus on that because it's not finished yet. It must no longer be the case that the best educated generation of young people ever, this is what we are, has such poor prospects, especially in terms of their employment. Currently, thousands of students in Europe do not know how to finance and successfully complete their studies. Moreover, more and more young people do not know how to escape the almost eternal loop of precarious jobs or even unemployment. These are current problems for young people that cannot be solved at national levels alone, especially in times of a European labor market. The EU and the member states have a duty to present solutions for this. to make Europe more social and thus fundamentally more crisis-proof. After all, this is also about the trust in the institutions and a now second generation that is on the verge of being lost, as is so often emphasized by decision makers. But we must not stop at emphasizing, we need strong actions now. Thanks.
Thanks a lot to you, Joscha. You just named a number of very, very important points. Some of them we will come back to you in a few minutes. Maybe before I'd like to, or I was actually always wondering, could you elaborate a little on how you in your position did try to influence the German Council presidency? So during the last 6 months, what did you do in your day-to-day work?
On the specific process of our lobbying on the youth guarantee, we were very closely in touch with the European Youth Forum, which was also in favor of a quality framework for the youth guarantee. So we had meetings as a youth committee with representatives of the ministry, of course, also in cooperation with the Youth Council and the Youth Forum, and in general, like press releases, not too big online campaign, and we did a brochure. I can send a link here where we draw our idea of a quality framework, how this could look like, and send it to all the important stakeholders. So that's basically it. But of course, our adult organizations have a very better direct contact to the relevant stakeholders than we as youth committees. So this is what happened aside to this.
Yeah, having good contacts is definitely an important thing, but we're working hard that also young people will have them and are in the center of decision making, actually. Thanks a lot. Maybe coming back to the Next Generation EU Fund. You already mentioned a lot of things. I mean, it was meant to contribute to a greener, more digitally oriented, and more crisis-proof Europe. You said you welcomed the initiative, but still you're missing some things. Maybe particularly in view of young people. What would you have expected to be included there, and what are you missing in there now?
Well, we do not have like concrete measures we would have liked to see, but we say it's more a general demand. The situation of young people, as I have described, is very precarious all over Europe, and still the policymakers, and there's so much people working in the ministries, in the commission, in the different directorates, and still they are obviously not able to present a good and comprehensive answer to the issues of young people. This is what we find is very problematic, and what we can do is then focusing on measures like the youth guarantee. Then we say we want to talk about a quality framework, and the answer is now it is not a time to talk about quality. So this is what was our reality in the contact with the Commission and so on. So on the one hand, we do not see that they have specific measures for youth. On the other hand, if we raise our topics, which are based on research, which are based on facts, they are not really included in their policies, and that's not too good.
Do you have any idea why so? I mean, why there's so, in your words, why there's so little interest on these issues?
That's a good question. I'd say just the perspectives are missing, because that's my personal guess, because they do not really have an idea of how the situation of real people is. They are working with numbers, of course, but what is behind these numbers and what does it mean for people being unemployed for 2 or 3 years is probably not inside of a lot of policymakers.
Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot. We actually have received a video provided by Jeff Portugal, which suits quite well here, and I think it would be nice to see it at this moment.
In my personal opinion, I think the health sector should be the one that we should be more worried about, and the one that we should be investing all our resources on. Specifically, and this is, I think, is a topic that is not taught enough, which is mental health and all the people that is suffering from mental issues and with the pandemic and the isolation. And I'm going to tackle two topics. For example, in nursing homes, all the old people that are suffering from extreme isolation should have, for example, access to a therapist, a psychologist, to a talk, and to be followed and to be more enclosed and more well, people, and by professional people, by professional caretakers and health workers. And also, not only that, but also small children and children still in school, especially in elementary school, when there is also a very big demand for example, a therapist inside school, or a therapist that can have sometimes a call and a talk with them after hours, after school, for example, a Zoom call by a therapist or something like that. Schools should be providing that issue, and this also enters in our health budget and all the health budget for public schools, for public nursing homes, and even the private ones should think about this. So this is the topic that I want to leave here today, which is focusing on the health side, because the economic side will eventually recover, but at least what Portugal is doing now is focusing all the resources on health, and I think all the other countries in Europe should do the same. So we first take care of ourselves, and then we progress with our work life and with our love life and with our families. And well, if we are not okay, we should we will not work also our best. So first we should take care of our families with the people surrounding us and ourselves, and then progress to make our economy also great again. And yeah, that's what I want to leave you guys today. Thanks a lot. And this is João from Jeff Portugal. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, João, who's actually also with us tonight, I guess. Yeah, here he is. Thanks a lot for these insights.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello.
Hello.
I think you made a very important point, because you connect the single topics of health and as well as of social and economic welfare. So maybe Joscha, question back to you. You mentioned before the precarious working conditions for people all across Europe. And that those are hit very hard by the crisis at the moment. What would be, I mean, we are not doing enough. We had this before, but we are in the middle of the second wave. So what would be measures, well, on the nation states on one hand could undertake now, but also on a European level to ensure that also the inequality between the single European countries is not further deepened? What could be done here?
At first, I'd like to mention occupational health and safety, because this is, I think, an issue which is especially for those frontline workers, as they are called, which are also a lot of young people in the hospitals and so on. that a lot of them feel not well prepared for their work in this special situation. So they are lacking of protective equipment, of hand sanitizers. There were new messages today from a distribution center of Amazon where not enough hand sanitizers are provided. And all these things help on the workplace, which is a topic which is not too much talk about in the public, I'd say, but which affects people. So this is a very concrete thing I'd suggest. On a European level, this is well, it's all these social tasks are not decided on a European level yet, let's say, because with the possible implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights, this might change. There are, I guess, some good opportunities next year with the Porto Summit and so on. And I have a lot of hope to the Portuguese presidency because they named the implementation as one of their priorities in the program as well. So I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, but I think the immediate responses have to be taken on a national level for especially young people. I think it's in education, so that they still have to go to full classes and so on. That this is a problem in the vocational education, that the distance learning is not functioning well, that the young people do not have like notebooks and so on because they are not able to afford it, that the programs are not running, and these things. This could be a immediate contribution to a better situation.
Thanks a lot. And maybe reflecting on European solidarity again. I mean, precisely the point of distributing necessary material for the hospitals, for example, has been a huge problem at the beginning of the crisis. We all remember when some countries, Germany, for example, refused to provide important material to Italy, who was in need. How can we ensure that in the future this won't happen again? I mean, European solidarity, how can we ensure that? Is it only something we must have in our hearts and our minds, or is it something we should strengthen through institutional changes, for example? I mean, there are suggestions also from Jeff Europe for a health system, for health union actually, that would foster such European solidarity, maybe. So that's not a race in the end.
That's a very hard question.
Sorry.
I think it starts with a first step would be a monitoring because I don't even think that the European institutions know how many materials and so on are at the national level. So why not, for example, protective equipment? Why not buy these on a European scale and then distribute it fairly to the national states? I think this is where a very practical thing where the European Commission or the European institutions could jump in, as they do with the vaccines now. But if this will lead to an institutionalization of solidarity, I don't know, but this could be, of course, a first step.
Mm-hmm. All right, thanks. I think that's actually a pretty good idea. So sometimes it starts with the very practical things, just as monitoring actually. I just got notice from Simon that we have a question. Simon, would you like to present the question?
Yeah, thank you so much, and hello from my side also. So we got one question prior to this meeting, and we talked about solidarity already. And Joscha, you mentioned the social pillar already. So the question we received was that Jeff, the young European Federalist, called on the German EU presidency to strengthen the social pillar of the EU in order to reduce social inequality. What efforts did the German EU presidency make, and were these measures appropriate and sufficient? Thank you.
As I said, the main issue is that the European pillar is not binding yet. It's just a proclamation by the European institutions, but it is not really part of the legislation or such yet. This is what needs to be done. So the minimum wage approach, for example, would be hopefully in line with the European Pillar of Social Rights. Could be one measure in this context. But yeah, as I said, there need efforts to be done to implement the pillar as a framework. However, they proclaimed it. Now it needs to be binding. That's what I can demand without losing myself in very technical questions how this could happen, but it has to happen.
Thanks a lot. I think since the 20 minutes are almost over, maybe I would proceed to our next topic. And Joscha, thank you very much for giving us your insights. We will all keep them in mind. And now I'm welcoming Christoph. Christoph, as I said before, is human rights activist for Amnesty International and the Refugee Law Clinic in Göttingen, and will talk with us about the issue of asylum and migration. Hi, Christoph.
Hi, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. If that's the case, I'll start with my opening statement, and then afterwards we can go ahead for the questions and go a bit more into detail. So thank you, Clara, and thank you.
Christoph,
yeah.
Please excuse me 1 second. Could you maybe raise the microphone to your mouth a little bit closer?
Okay.
Thank you.
This makes gestures a bit more difficult, but I think I'll handle it. Okay, I hope you can hear me better now. So thank you, Clara, and thank you for making this talk possible, especially under these circumstances. I think we all have been somehow under the spell of and affected by COVID-19, but it's obvious that we, or people generally, aren't affected equally by the virus. Anyways, many people tend to focus more on themselves, which is important to a certain extent in terms of self-care and well-being during these difficult times. But what many people also do is to pay less attention towards what's happening around us in the world, in this case within the European Union, beyond the virus, or simply what the virus does to others than us, our friends and families. So the subject of asylum and migration, especially the situation of refugees, is a terrifying example, amongst others, for how we cope with human rights violations, human suffering within the EU under these special circumstances, now, but also during the last years. Looking or not looking to Libya, to the Mediterranean Sea, to the camps in Greece, and all over Europe, or even towards everyday racism in our own cities. It's our decision if we look or look not at these problems. But it's not only about looking, about focusing, about paying attention, it's about acting, and Germany had the chance to do so during its Council's presidency over the last 6 months. And despite the issues were extensive, complex, and are present, as I said, since years, there's no doubt that they can't be solved within weeks or months. But this also can't be an excuse to keep ongoing and violating fundamental rights and human rights, the human rights of refugees. So I think you are probably all aware of the different levels or issues which occurred and occur concerning migration and asylum, and it might be a bit redundant to elaborate on them all, but I'd like to point out just a few of them to show what we're talking about and what is still a reality within the EU today, before Germany took over the presidency, but also during the last years, so basically since 2014. there's the situation of refugees in member states confronted with everyday racism, long procedures, difficult interaction with administration, and for many, in the end, deportation after a more or less fair procedure. In many member states, refugees are put into camps under inhumane conditions, and I think the most horrifying example is Moria, which is still in existence, but just under a different name. The situation at the EU border is still terrifying, where we now, additionally to this discussion about sea rescue, are confronted with pushbacks by Frontex. So what we see there is kind of a move of the EU from refraining, being an absence as it was before, as there was no rescue mission, to a more actively manner of coping with refugees on the Mediterranean Sea. So the EU, through its agency Frontex, now brings people back to danger or even to death. And furthermore, coming back to these different levels or fields of interest, I could also mention the cooperation with the Libyan Coast Guard, the camps in Libya, and in the end, the exports of weapons, which also amplify conflicts and urge people in the end to flee again. So before Germany took over the EU Council's presidency, Amnesty International has called for the use of Germany's impact, of course, as Germany is one of the big member states within the European Union. And Amnesty International also called to base the reforms concerning migration and asylum on human rights, to take a human rights-based approach. What Angela Merkel did in her opening speech or during her speech in the European Parliament was that she remembered the members of Parliament, or she remembered the European Union, that it should raise its voice for human dignity and that this voice was in need. What we see now, 6 months later, is that there hasn't been substantial progress. The European Commission drafted, also based on ideas from the German federal government, a new pact on migration and asylum, which has been discussed the last months, but it seems that the only thing which member states seem to agree on is the continuing policies of isolation, deterrence, and deportation. So in the end, it seems as human rights violations will go on. In many member states, and now I come back to the beginning, to the COVID-19 pandemic, saving lives has become the main priority of the states during the last months, which is important and which is absolutely reasonable and correct. But it seems that not every life is worth enough fighting for if people still drown in the Mediterranean Sea, are put into camps, and are not heard in a fair procedure seeking for asylum. And this has to change. What also has to change in a more general sense is our perception of the so-called European solution. The European solution can't mean some sort of forced compromise or a phrase given in speeches. The European solution is a solution founded in human rights. And in this sense, we've seen an absence of European solutions during the last years and also during the last 6 months of the German EU Council presidency. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Christoph. Again, in a number of very, very important issues. Maybe let's start with your activism, actually. So you, as a human rights activist, can you elaborate a little and tell us what that means actually at the moment, and also what, from your point of view, is the topic or the issue that's most on your mind at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think we're living in difficult times for activism. I mean, we've lived through so many regulations during the last months. I remember in summer when we went to the streets and thousands of people asked for the end of the Moria camp, and thousands of people came together, and that was really a large symbol. And had a great impact, even though the camp is still in existence. Or another great action which was carried out in summer was when activists put thousands of white chairs in front of the German parliament, a picture which went viral. But now we're back in lockdown, at least here in Germany, and we're going through the second wave. And it's difficult again to raise our voices and to go to the street, because that's what activism is about. I mean, going to protests and address politicians directly. But anyways, there are other opportunities, and at least many simple ways of getting active and trying to look for change. I mean, there's still many groups as Vide-President, the Amnesty groups, Refugee Law Clinics, and others, which are still active and fighting for rights, and they're still worth to support. And I think a way of trying to cope with this pandemic and the actual situations to become creative. I mean, maybe through artwork, through the means of the internet, there are possibilities of reaching people to get active, and especially to pressure politicians. And I think the actions in summer where only a single activist went to the streets and throughout raised their voices and showed which problems we are facing concerning asylum, showed us some great ideas. On the other hand, and these are really, really small things and can be done within 2 minutes, is maybe just like sign petitions concerning the closing of Moria or the admission of refugees and other demands. Or if possible, even though we know some people at the moment are really, really in a crisis of their personal existence, but it's possible to donate just a few euros to support people or NGO which are fighting for rights. But coming to the second part of the question, I mean, where to put a priority? I think this is quite hard to answer, because as I try to line out in my opening statement, there's so many different levels and so many different issues which need to be solved, that it's hard to prioritize. But anyways, I think there's some ongoing challenges which need quick solution, and where quick solution is also possible, depending on the political will. So a matter of realpolitik. But one which falls in that scope is definitely Moria. So the camp, which now firms under the name Karatepe, but better known under the name Moria 2, where many refugees and experts, people working there in and around the camp, say that the conditions are even worse than before. So, for example, during the last weeks, it rained a lot and the camp is now underwater. And we're not talking about tiny puddles, but rather the camp is a lake. Other shocking news from there were, for example, that the children were treated in the medical facilities and they had to be treated because they were bitten by rats. And the other circumstances which occurred already early in the first Moria camp, that the camp was overcrowded and there are no sanitary facilities, no electricity, no adequate medical facilities, etc. That's still the case. Additionally, that the infrastructure which was built in the first camp is now, after the fire, after the camp burned down, not there anymore. So that's something where we as Amnesty and many human rights activists call for immediate action, and which wouldn't ask that much effort.
Thank you. Yeah, well, firstly on the point of activism, I mean, you have a number of organizations here with Joscha and Maria and you and the Jeff Germany as well, who are all trying to cope with the situation, but I agree. It's much harder to be not able to meet in person, right? But I can only imagine how that's for human rights activists. You mentioned the camps. You mentioned Moria and Moria 2. So Karatepe is what we all know what we're talking about, and I think by now we've all seen the pictures, not only of the fire a few months ago, but also of the new camp, which is basically a lake. And to be honest, I'm always very much speechless when I see those pictures, and I can't really believe what's happening there. How do you, and also within Amnesty International, address politicians and policymakers on reacting on the situation? What are your main demands there, and on what different levels do you operate?
Well, first, maybe another fact which I forgot to conclude the last answer, which I found just out recently, which I found really shocking, is that the European Commission, in its new plan or a new pact on migration and asylum, is planning to build kind of a pilot project or create a model camp, which is to be built on Lesbos, where the Moria camp is situated right now, which, seems to me kind of grotesque, as this camp, which has been so often in media and which delivered so many terrifying pictures, now is planned to become kind of a model project, or an ideal camp. And what we ask, and what so many people did ask, is just to close this camp, to shut it down, and to bring people to Greece landmark, and to find a mode of deployment of these people, to bring them in a safe harbor, and to end this story of camps, which we've seen throughout years in the European Union. And as Amnesty, we're a big NGO, and we're working on different levels. So our regional office try to address the Commission, and there are different diplomats over there, and here in Berlin we try to reach the foreign minister, the Ministry for Internal Affairs, and so we're working on different levels and trying to approach different people.
Thank you. You already mentioned the new pact on migration and asylum, and we will talk about that in a minute. But maybe still before, it's since 2015 that we are discussing on a new system and a new asylum system, on reforms, because we know the situation is no longer, it's not a good situation at all. What we say, why are policymakers so resilient, or what are the main problems? I mean, looking back to the council presidency, for us as Jeff, we are looking on that also from an institutional point of view, and to our opinion, the issue of anonymity, that you can't vote by majority voting, but you need all states to agree, is a central problem to agree on very, very important measures to be undertaken. But what else is there? So it's 5 years, and we're still pretty much we're still here, still discussing about those camps. What would you say? Why is there so? Is it a lack of political will that we're not coming forward, or what is it?
Well, I totally agree on your opinion concerning the council, and apart from that, I think it's mostly the approach the different member states, or maybe regional approaches we see are the reason that we can't find a solution or a compromise. And what Germany tried to do was now to bring forward this issue with a new pact, in cooperation with the Commission, but it didn't work out. And what could be observed after the Commission drafted this new pact in September was that immediately reactions could be seen by the Southern European states, which formed one group, which said, well, this isn't really a solidarity mechanism. This isn't solidarity, because the Dublin regulation wasn't really abandoned. Then there was the other group, which, well, mostly is referred to as the Eastern European group, which, yeah, neglects any sort of cooperation or admission of refugees. And then the Western European states, which, yeah, are handling with a lot of refugees, and yeah, are looking for this solidarity solution, but I feel like they don't come really together and find a solution.
Thanks. Well, on this pact, I mean, it's a whole package. In general, just to take a step back, what was your impression of as you first read the first draft or the actual proposal?
Well, the first draft is like kind of, well, it's a 500 pages draft, so there are many points within it, but my first, what I thought first, and what many other legal advisors or human rights activists or lawyers say, that it seemed that the main goal still or continuing is that the European Union wants to increase deportations, make them more efficient, make the border procedure more efficient, which also in the end means more deportations. And then there is, I mean, I said solidarity is hard to reach, but there's kind of a new solidarity mechanism planned, but it's named rather flexible solidarity, which means that in German it's called Abschiebepatenschaften. In English it's return sponsorship, that the states, so in this case the Eastern European states, which are not willing to take over refugees, shall be only responsible for the deportation, and that's again some kind of grotesque interpretation of solidarity. So all in all, this whole pact seems just to enforce this idea of deterrence, of deportation and isolation. Yeah, which is, yeah, just sad, but and it doesn't, even though, I mean, I said it in the beginning, imagining that there would have been an agreement on Monday when the ministries for internal affairs with Horst Seehofer met, even though there was no solution, one can't call this a European solution, as it's so much violating human rights.
One aspect which is often discussed is the registration and pre-screening of asylum seekers outside EU territory. So before they go on those ships and risk their lives. What do you say on those ideas?
Well, I think these ideas are discussed, and but they're far from realistic from like a realpolitik point of view. I mean, I think the German Minister for Foreign Affairs is not willing to give the right to embassies to analyze or to check if people would be able to get asylum in Germany and make those procedures possible. And generally, I think we have to ask ourselves if these procedures or these procedures would limit migration, what is the aim of the European Union, but which is no solution, or not a goal to reach. So I think it just leads us to it's kind of distraction, this whole discussion, because it's not facing or coping with the real problems we have.
Thanks. We have a question from the chat or from the Mentimeter. So here's Simon again. Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you, Clara. Christoph, the question that we received kind of is connected to what you were talking about around the Pact on Asylum and Migration, and kind of also looking forward a little bit. So the question reads whether the Council presidency should find a compromise between more progressive and more reluctant EU states on migration policy. And is this in conflict with humane migration policy? So maybe also thinking about the Portuguese and the Slovenian presidency, what the approach should be and whether this trying to find a compromise is the right way to go, which some may argue was the approach under the German presidency. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this interesting question. I definitely think that this pact or the aim of the German presidency was to find this kind of compromise, like bring those different regional approaches together and kind of create this weird solidarity mechanism. But yeah, and I think it wasn't out of any impossibilities to find a compromise on Monday. And now the pact will be handed over to Portugal, and maybe the Portuguese presidency will be more lucky. But many people do say, well, it will take us another couple of years until we will find finally a solution, if ever. Yeah, even though there will be, or imagining, as I said, there will be a compromise in next spring, I doubt that it will be fully adequate concerning human rights. So yeah, because there's still not the political will to welcome people, to protect people. And you might have heard some speeches or some talks by the Commission's president, by Ursula von der Leyen, and she's not talking about the protection of human rights. She's talking about border protection. She's talking about management of migration. And under these terms, yeah, she's hiding something else than the protection of refugees, which we as human rights activists do ask, and which is, as we see it, a fundamental task of the European Union, and another point where the European Union does fail at the moment.
And it's not the only one. Christoph, thanks a lot for your insights. I'm afraid I have to make another cut here and lead over to our final issue, which is the rule of law. And a very warm welcome, Maria, to you. Hello.
Hello, Clara. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for your invitation. I was already very happy to attend the previous webinar you organized at the opening of the German EU Council presidency. We were formulating our wishes, our expectations for the coming 6 months. Today, the difference is that our friend from Hungary is not there, so I have the difficult role of representing both Poland and Hungary somehow on this topic. As a preliminary remark, I will be shorter than my colleagues because I really want to focus on the Q&A. I'm afraid I won't be very optimistic on the rule of law because yes, the EU Council presidency was successful in finding a compromise on the MFF and the Recovery Fund. The issue of the rule of law has been deeply discussed at both the EU level and also in Poland. But nothing really, let's say, binding for Poland has been adopted, and much more could have been made in this matter. Later on, I would like to present you a little bit the contradiction in terms of communication on what was happening at the EU summit. So the communication at the EU level, and then how it was presented by state media in Poland. And also, I will mention, well, the instruments related to the rule of law that have been adopted and, well, the limits of these instruments. And, well, later on, we can also talk about the challenges for the future.
Yes, thanks a lot. Well, looking to Poland, the Polish government is being accused to improperly extend its influence over the justice system. The establishment of so-called LGBTQI-free zones is a clear act of discrimination and undermines fundamental democratic values, and also the freedom of media is repeatedly challenged. So to many Europeans, actually across the continent, the state of the rule of law in Poland is clearly in danger. But the Polish government defends itself against these accusations. My question is here, what's the public opinion of Polish citizens on the state of the rule of law in their country?
Well, yes, so this matter has been discussed in, well, Kurier Europejski articles. It is, of course, raised by the main opposition parties. I had the opportunity to work in one of these last year, so I really saw how things were processed from Warsaw. And, well, the state of the rule of law in Poland is a bit serious. It has been let's say, worsening since the arrival of the Law and Justice Party to power in 2015. Everything started with the politicization of the Constitutional Tribunal, then the functions of the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General have been merged, which is contrary to the independence of the judiciary. And another example would be the recent controversial bill passed last winter, which is aimed at sanctioning politicized judges. But in practice, it is aimed at disciplining the judges for criticizing the system. Now, very currently, the government is conducting a policy of repolonization of the media. 10 days ago, a state-run oil company, PKN Orlen, bought a media group from the Germans. So the idea is really to buy the media back, let's say, and give them to Polish owners. And so overall, the government is seeking to take control over key Polish institutions, over the media, and there always this, let's say, anti-LGBT campaign you mentioned. It was a very hot topic of the presidential campaign, which wasn't actually the crucial topic of the moment because the elections took place during the pandemic. But unfortunately, the government managed to impose that narrative because of the control of the public media it had. So the situation is getting very, very serious. And unfortunately, let's say, the opposition is also very fragmented. Before every election, there is a new party that is created, which is supposed to be the third wave, but it never gets enough votes to actually make a change. So it is also another concern we have currently in Poland.
Thank you. So let's try to have a look at what can be done to strengthen the rule of law. Actually, the Council Presidency. I mean, we all probably all checked the discussion in the last weeks. There was an intense debate on the introduction of the rule of law mechanism as a condition to the multi-annual financial framework. And here again, Poland, together with Hungary, opposed the adoption of this mechanism. So, Maria, how do you, I mean, as a young pro-European woman from Poland, evaluate the attempts undertaken by the German Council Presidency to implement such mechanism?
Yes, so here there would be maybe 2 points raised. First of all, the, let's say, ambiguous communication on the whole rule of law conditionality, and on the other hand, the actual instruments that have been adopted and their meaning for the changes in Polish and Hungarian institutions. So first of all EU member states have agreed on the rule of law mechanism during the extraordinary European summit in July. Poland didn't have any problem with that. At that time, the message of the Polish government and of the public media was that there was no concrete rule of law mechanism in the adopted package, and the government was congratulating itself for successfully blocking the rule of law conditionality. Then the issue reappeared after the Commission published the first ever rule of law report in September, and when there was actually a proposal of a rule of law mechanism. The Polish Minister for European Affairs said in October, for example, that the German presidency's proposal did not correspond to the agreement reached in July, and that such a mechanism was arbitrary and could lead to legal uncertainty. The Polish Prime Minister said also that he was ready to veto the whole package, both the MFF and the recovery package. So there was really something at stake. In parallel, there have been articles about Polexit being published. So this also was very worrying for, let's say, the opposition, for the progressive civil society. And what is interesting is that a survey was conducted in October, I think, and more than 70% of Poles said that they wanted the EU funds to be linked to the respect of the rule of law. So there really was a difference between what the government was communicating domestically. It was always talking about a national success against the German presidency, against the EU. And then you'll see a split between the Polish civil society and the ruling majority. When it comes to the instruments that are supposed to protect the rule of law in the EU, I think there is a misunderstanding on the rule of law mechanism and the rule of law conditionality, because in Poland they were often presented as one thing. So rule of law conditionality, but we are actually talking about two different instruments. On the one hand, there is the rule of law conditionality that the Polish government, that Hungary were opposing, which is a financial instrument aimed at protecting the EU budget in case the budget might be at risk due to deficiencies in the rule of law in a member state. And on the other hand, the rule of law mechanism, which is a process of an annual dialogue between EU institutions, the member states, the civil society, and national parliaments, and it is funded on the rule of law reports. So that mechanism is more a preventive tool, and there are no sanctions envisaged in this instrument. So, as I said, the adoption of the MFF and the Recovery Fund are, of course, a success. It is also a big achievement that the rule of law mechanism has been adopted. It contributes to stressing the importance of the core EU values. It is also important because for the first time, the concept of the rule of law has been clearly defined, because previously this definition was unclear. So it was difficult to really decide when there was a breach to the rule of law. But I'm afraid that the new rule of law conditionality and the rule of law mechanism will not lead to substantial changes in Polish, Hungarian, or other institutions breaching the rule of law for, well, two main reasons. Because the rule of law mechanism is, first of all, very narrow. It covers only cases where the EU budget is at risk because of problems with the rule of law. So Hungary was very worried about it because, well, Orban's regime is deeply corrupt and he might be exposed to the procedure, but Poland seems less at risk. Because there aren't such big problems when it comes to the management of EU funds domestically. And a second weakness of these instruments is the idea that Hungary will bring an action for annulment to the European Court of Justice, and as a consequence, the application of the new regulation will be delayed by around 2 years. So well, the main, let's say, disappointment is that the breach to the rule of law does not automatically trigger the rule of law conditionality, which was a wish expressed in early July.
Thanks a lot. Actually, my next question would have been whether you're optimistic that the rule of law mechanism would help strengthen the rule of law in Poland, but I guess after what you've said before, the answer is no. So maybe, I mean, you mentioned the split before, and you mentioned particularly the split between civil society and the media, and what they are presenting. I was wondering, what would measures be for the moment in Poland to overcome that split, particularly between the two groups in society?
Well, there is a very clear split between public and private media. And the problem is that the society is so divided that the two groups are not very much communicating with each other. So I think the solution is more on the long term. First of all, there needs to be a bigger emphasis put on how to say, civic education. So raise young people's awareness about the importance of getting diversified information, but also a very important role is, well, let's say the EU has an important role here to play as well, because not that many people in Poland have access to Erasmus exchanges for let's say financial reasons, and this is a pity because it really also opens your eyes on different cultures, different perceptions of the EU. So that would also be a challenge on the long run. And yes, I think that for now, as long as the public media are under control, there is not a lot to do, unfortunately. Also, there is a lot of manipulation on social media, troll farms. They were very active during the campaigns. So yes, it is not a very beautiful image.
Which actually highlights how important your work at Kurier Europejski is at the moment. So congratulations to that already. Maybe a question about strengthening civil society initiatives. I heard the idea that maybe one should think about decoupling this from national funding and foster more European or more funding from the EU side for those civil society organizations. Would you say this would be something what should be increased?
Well, I think definitely, because otherwise all the, let's say, opposition actors will never get access to funds distributed by the government. I know many people, for example, in cultural projects, they are trying to get funding, but they know that they have no chance because there are some favored groups that already know they will get funding. So it is a never-ending problem, unfortunately.
All right. On a European level, we had a very long time the German-French-Polish triangle, so that worked very well, especially as a motor for European integration. Yet it's obvious that at the moment it's not a triangle anymore. And I was wondering it's a very broad and very hard question, but what must happen that Poland becomes a driver of European integration again?
Well, I think you were mentioning the Weimar Triangle, so the glorious times of Poland having an important role and positive role in the EU. Well, let me say that the next parliamentary elections will take place in 2023, so maybe then the society will be upset enough to actually vote for another, let's say, political group. But the condition is that the opposition unites for, let's say, the bigger objective of putting an end to the current problems with the rule of law and also the division of the society. And only then, I think, Poland will change its track from an anti-German, very focused on its sovereignty country to a more pro-European one. Because for now, on the short term, there is no solution, unfortunately. And it is, well, a very positive thing to see that there are still many protests, especially now following the ruling on abortion rights. It is very positive to see that people are protesting and still questioning what the government is doing, but we can't do anything more than protesting until 2023. And informing, of course.
Right. Thank you very much. In fact, thanks to all of you. We are almost at the end of our 90 minutes that we're given. But I'd like to do a look into the future. And therefore I would actually ask each of you, so Joscha, Christoph, and Maria, to take a few time and think about 3 demands or wishes for the future of Europe, actually. 3 demands or wishes you have, particularly for the Portuguese Council presidency, because I mean, actually we're lucky here. We're not fully at the end because we're in a trio presidency. So we have another two countries that will proceed with the common program. So we're not at the end of the road yet. Maybe Maria, you just talk to us, so I'll give you a few more minutes to think about those 3 wishes or 3 demands. So I'm looking towards Joscha. Do you already have 3 things on your mind, maybe?
Yeah, and the first one actually also grow with the statements of you two. Thanks for your statements. Because my first wish would be that the Portuguese presidency doesn't fear to turn the big wheel, let's say, and does not stop at just minimum compromises. I don't know how realistic this is, but this is my wish, since, as I pointed out, for example, in the youth guarantee, where we just had this minimum compromise in the end, this is not sufficient. And having in mind that with the promotion of the Green Deal, the whole recovery package, the implementation of the MMF, there's so big topics on the table. So yeah, turn the big wheel, I'd say.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think turn the big wheel is a nice metaphor. Looking to Christoph, what about you? Do you already have 3 wishes?
Well, I'd also follow the big wheel, but to go a bit more into detail, might there be a compromise or not on asylum and migration? I think, or my wish would be that the Portuguese presidency would take a more serious human rights approach, and not only in language but in action, that it's visible, that we might see the end of Moria and the criminalization of solidarity concerning sea rescue on the Mediterranean Sea. That's one point. And also, as it's obvious that the Portuguese presidency might focus a bit more on the social Europe, that it will take serious human dignity, or the social pillar, not only for European citizens, but also for refugees, that it's guaranteed for everybody, also people in camps or wherever. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks a lot. Maria, was that enough time for you to think about 3 wishes? Maybe something immediately came to your mind?
Well, maybe not 3, but well, already touched upon Erasmus. It is too late to change, say, the EU budget, but encourage exchanges for European youth, give more possibilities to discover other cultures. I always repeat this story, but one of my Polish friends told me one day that he discovered Europe through his Erasmus friend. She was a Jeffer from France, and she really opened his eyes on what the EU was and what possibilities it offered. Then, of course, well, support the independent media, and less related to the Portuguese presidency wish is that Jeff Poland develops. It is developing right now, and I really wish it can become more active and go to universities, organize events, and well, gather an increasing number of members.
Thank you. I just noted that Joscha wrote in the chat that he has another wish, and since it's Christmas in a few days, feel free to add another wish.
Thank you very much. I highly appreciate. What I want to add is that I think that we turned away from all these austerity measures in this answer to the crisis. I wish that Portugal, as a country which was hit now 2 times very hard by the crisis, has a bit of sensitivity and keeps Europe on the right track, let's say, because with the different parties in government in the different European countries, it's a very, very thin line still that we fall back into our old answers, let's say. And I really hope, because the people in Europe need it definitely, that we now go the more progressive way, the more future-oriented way, and that's what I really wish for young, old, for all people in Europe.
I think these are a number of very, very good wishes that I would definitely add to my list to Santa or to whomever. So probably to the European member states and the Portuguese Council presidency. We'll see whether I'll write that letter, but I'll let you know. But I would add them there. Before we close this event, I would like to introduce to you Christine, because Christine did some very nice work within the last 90 minutes. Are you already ready to present what you've done, Christine?
Yes, I just try to start my video. Now you can see me. Hello, everybody. I will try to share my screen because I wasn't just listening. I was also trying to capture all the thoughts, the ideas, the discussion we had so far in a picture. These are little nice icons to remember all the topics we were discussing the last 1.5 hours, and to maybe read through all these icons and visual. I can help you and go through it like a couple of minutes that we all finish with this nice summary. Clara, maybe you can see you in the left corner because you were the one who gave us the structure of these topics. And we started with Joscha, and I put you to the number 1. So we started with you, and you focused on especially at first the corona virus, and also about like how that affects the young people. And what I hear from you that we have to, when we talk about recovery, we have to include all the thoughts and the ideas of the focus of the young people. And this could be very practical, that you mentioned. Also, the education takes a big role, that we have to focus when we talk about recovery, also the income of everybody, the rights, the fair work, and so on and so on. And we need not also discuss that, we need also really like to guarantee the quality of the human rights for everybody. And for that, we need the different perspectives. And the green lines are the last statement you gave us, turn the big wheel. I put it there, maybe I put the icon later, but I hadn't time for that. And the second thing you add was also finding the new answers. And I really like to get creative and find something new. Yeah, we had João from Portugal in the video. That's why I put you in the video. And what I remember from you was like, before we focus on the economy, we have to focus on ourselves, on the family, and then we can make the economy great again. And that's, you can see it on the right corner. Second, Christoph, we had you, and I really like in your speech the action. We need to act now, not just talking about something. We need to act, and we have to bring people away from the danger. As you can see maybe in the picture, we the earth has a door in Europe, and the door should be open and not closed. We should put the human rights definitely in the focus, as you can see, and maybe you can also see the welcome sign. We need to welcome people like really for sure, and not just like putting them in camps, and like even dangerous camps, as we heard from your talk. And of course, the activism is really hard in this time of COVID. But you also stayed positive, what I really liked. And you said like we have to, that makes us like more creative for fighting for the human rights. And the green lines, you can see the serious action, as I mentioned in the beginning, and for everybody, the human first for everybody. And on like last time we heard Maria, thank you for your insights about Poland and how you're fighting with like this different groups of people. And as I maybe focus on that in the beginning, we need the diverse information. We need to have like an open mind, and not just like that somebody's making our mind. So that's why I I put a lot of people here that are fighting, and I really like the energy that you don't give up and you want to fight, and you want to be change maker. And I think this takes a big role in the future, even if there are hard times in the moment. Yes, and the green lines, as I want to finish with that, is that you focus, what I really liked, on the Erasmus, the exchange for young people, or even like I should maybe think also about old people. Maybe they should go on Erasmus again to feel the good vibe of like being in a like diverse, open-minded crowd, and not just like alone. Maybe we should also bring the old people back to Erasmus, but this is just like my ad. Maybe you didn't said that. And the independent media, of course, because you're fighting in that. Yes, that's the picture.
Thanks a lot. I'm always deeply impressed in what you can create actually in 90 minutes of time. And looking into the faces of our panelists, I see impression as well. So thanks a lot. Of course, everybody, we will keep the picture and we will publish it, so everybody will have time to look into it a little further. And yeah, thanks to all our panelists for the very interesting discussion. I mean, it's only 90 minutes, and it's 3 very, very important topics, and it's by far not enough time to save Europe actually, but knowing that people are engaging each day on those issues is to me always something which really makes me happy about the future of Europe. And I think working together, and if we work together, we are on a good track. Thanks also to all the people who helped in realizing this event today. And finally, of course, also to our guests and everybody who stayed with us here on Zoom or on Facebook. I wish you all a very nice evening, nice weekend, and also nice winter holidays. See you soon.
Thank you very much, Clara. Thank you, Christine, for the very nice summary. And thanks, Joscha and Christoph.